The sun beat down mercilessly on Naomi Prescott's pale skin, turning it an angry red as she stumbled through the vast, unforgiving desert. Her wedding gown, once pristine white and flowing with delicate lace, was now torn and stained with dirt and sweat. 3 days ago, she had been traveling to meet her future husband, a man she had never met when bandits attacked the stagecoach. In the chaos, she had fled into the wilderness, choosing the unknown desert over the known brutality of the outlaws who had already killed the driver and her chaperone. It was 1873, and the Arizona Territory was as beautiful as it was deadly. Naomi's throat burned with thirst, her lips cracked and bleeding. The small canteen she had managed to grab during her escape had run dry yesterday. Her vision blurred as the heat waves danced across the desert floor, creating phantom lakes that disappeared as she approached them. The sun that had once seemed like a benevolent friend now felt like an enemy, relentlessly bearing down on her with its fiery wrath. "Just a little farther," she whispered to herself, though she had no idea where she was going. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, cacti and brush the only landmarks in a sea of sand and rock. Her wedding dress, meant for the cool interior of a church, felt like a furnace against her skin. She had torn away the heavy petticoats hours ago, leaving them behind like breadcrumbs that would never lead anyone to her. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Naomi's steps became more unsteady. The world tilted and spun around her. "Please," she prayed, though she wasn't sure whom she was addressing, "please help me." Her knees buckled and she fell to the ground, the rough sand scraping her palms. She tried to rise but found she had no strength left. The horizon blurred and darkness began to close in around the edges of her vision. In the distance, a figure appeared on horseback, wavering like a mirage in the heat. Naomi squinted, unsure if what she was seeing was real or a hallucination born of desperation. The figure grew larger, approaching at a steady pace. A man on a dappled gray horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "Water," she tried to call out, but her voice was a dry croak that barely carried past her lips. As consciousness slipped away from her, the last thing Naomi saw was the mysterious rider dismounting and rushing toward her, dust kicking up around his boots. Quentin Blackwood had been tracking a small herd of wild mustangs when he spotted something unusual in the distance, a splash of white against the reddish-brown landscape. Curiosity piqued, he guided his horse, Thunder, toward the anomaly. As he drew closer, his heart nearly stopped. It was a woman in what appeared to be a wedding dress, collapsed on the desert floor. "Whoa, Thunder," he commanded, pulling the reins and dismounting in one fluid motion. Years of working as a ranch hand and occasionally tracking outlaws for the sheriff had made him quick on his feet. He knelt beside the unconscious woman, noting with alarm the severe sunburn on her face and arms, the cracked lips, and the torn dress that spoke of a desperate journey. "Miss, can you hear me?" He gently turned her over, checking for signs of life. Relief washed over him when he felt a faint pulse at her wrist. Acting quickly, he reached for his canteen and carefully moistened her lips with a few drops of water. She didn't respond. Whatever had happened to this woman, she needed help immediately. Quentin knew the nearest town, Copper Springs, was at least a half-day's ride away. His own small cabin was closer, perhaps 3 hours if Thunder maintained a steady pace. Decision made, he carefully lifted the woman into his arms, surprised at how light she felt despite the layers of her dress. He mounted Thunder, adjusting her so she was cradled against his chest, her head resting against his shoulder. "Hold on, miss," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I've got you now." As they rode across the desert, Quentin kept a vigilant eye on the woman's condition. He stopped twice to give her more water, trickling it slowly between her lips to prevent choking. She remained unconscious, but her breathing seemed to steady somewhat. Who was she? What was she doing out here alone, dressed as a bride? The questions multiplied in his mind, but answers would have to wait until she was strong enough to provide them. The sun was beginning its descent when Quentin's cabin came into view. It was a modest structure, built with his own hands over the past 5 years. A small corral stood adjacent to it, currently empty save for a few chickens pecking at the ground. A stream ran nearby, providing precious water in this arid land. He dismounted carefully, keeping the woman secure in his arms, and carried her inside. The interior was simple but clean: a main room with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area, and a separate bedroom. He laid her gently on his bed, then hurried to fetch fresh water from the stream. Upon returning, Quentin set to work. He dampened a clean cloth and began to wipe the dust and grime from her face, revealing delicate features beneath the sunburn. Her hair, which he now saw was a rich chestnut brown, was tangled with burrs and desert debris. He worked methodically, cleaning her face, arms, and hands with the cool water. He removed her torn shoes and bathed her feet, wincing at the blisters and cuts that marked her journey. As the sun set completely, casting the cabin into shadow, Quentin lit an oil lamp and continued his ministrations. He knew enough about desert sickness to recognize that the woman was suffering from severe dehydration and heat exposure. Throughout the evening, he roused her enough to take small sips of water, though she never fully regained consciousness. Night fell, and Quentin made himself a pallet on the floor beside the bed, unwilling to leave the mysterious woman alone. He fell into a light sleep, waking frequently to check on his patient and offer more water. It was just before dawn when he heard her stir. A soft moan, followed by the rustle of bedsheets. Quentin sat up immediately, reaching for the lamp. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse but audible, tinged with fear. "You're safe, miss," Quentin replied, keeping his voice low and gentle. "I found you collapsed in the desert yesterday." "My name is Quentin Blackwood. This is my cabin." The woman tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. "I can't, everything hurts." "That's the sun's sickness," he explained, reaching for the water cup. "You need to drink, but slowly." He supported her head as she took a few careful sips. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm Naomi Prescott. Pleased to meet you, Miss Prescott, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Quentin set the cup down. "Can you tell me what happened, how you came to be alone in the desert?" Naomi closed her eyes, memories flooding back. "The stagecoach, we were attacked, bandits. They killed Mr. Johnson, the driver, and Mrs. Harmon, my chaperone." Her voice broke. I just ran into the desert. I didn't know what else to do." "You were traveling to where?" "Copper Springs. I am, to be married." Her eyes opened, filled with sudden panic. "What day is it? How long have I been here?" "It's Thursday morning. You've been here less than a day. I found you yesterday afternoon." Naomi's panic didn't subside. "I was supposed to arrive in Copper Springs on Tuesday." "The wedding was to be on Saturday. He'll think I've abandoned him." "Who will?" "Patrick Donovan, my fiancé." She paused, then added quietly, "A man I've never met." Quentin's eyebrows rose. "A mail-order bride?" Naomi nodded weakly. "My father died last year, left nothing but debts." "I had few options." She looked around the small cabin. "How far are we from Copper Springs?" "About a day's ride," Quentin replied. "But you're in no condition to travel, Miss Prescott. You need rest, food, and time to recover." "But the wedding can wait," he interrupted firmly. "If this Donovan fellow has any decency, he'll understand once he learns what happened." Naomi didn't seem convinced, but exhaustion was already pulling her back toward sleep. "Perhaps you could send word," she murmured, her eyes drifting closed. "I'll see what can be done," Quentin promised, though he knew it wouldn't be easy. The nearest telegraph office was in Copper Springs itself. "Rest now." As Naomi fell back into a fitful sleep, Quentin sat beside the bed, studying her face in the soft lamplight. There was something about her, a quiet strength beneath the vulnerability that stirred something within him. He had lived alone for 5 years, ever since coming west after the war, seeking solitude and peace. Now, this unexpected visitor had disrupted his carefully constructed isolation, and strangely, he found he didn't mind. The next few days established a routine. Naomi slept much of the time, her body fighting to recover from the ordeal. When awake, she accepted the simple foods Quentin prepared: broth, porridge, and eventually more substantial fare as her strength returned. They talked during these periods, sharing snippets of their lives. Quentin learned that Naomi had been a schoolteacher in Boston before her father's death. She was 22 years old and had never ventured west of the Mississippi until now. Her decision to become a mail-order bride had been made out of necessity rather than choice. Patrick Donovan owns the largest mercantile in Copper Springs, she explained on the third day, sitting up in bed and sipping chicken broth. He wrote that he needed a wife who was educated and could help with the business accounts. It seemed practical. Quentin nodded, understanding the economics if not the emotion of such an arrangement. And what did you know of him beyond that? Very little. He's 45, a widower with no children. His first wife died 2 years ago. Naomi set down her bowl. He sent money for my travel expenses and a gold locket with his photograph inside. Her hand went to her throat, then fell away. I lost it during the attack. I'm sorry, Quentin said, though part of him wasn't sorry at all that she had lost this connection to her intended husband. What about you, Mr. Blackwood? What brought you to this lonely stretch of desert? Quentin rarely spoke of his past, but something about Naomi's direct gaze made him want to share. The war, he said simply. I served 4 years with the Union Army, saw things no man should see. When it ended, I couldn't go back to Virginia, too many ghosts. He looked out the small window toward the vast desert beyond, came west looking for space to breathe, found this land, built this cabin, been here 5 years now. And you're alone, no family, lost my parents before the war. No siblings, he smiled faintly. Just me and Thunder out here, raising a few cattle and breaking wild horses to sell in town. Naomi studied him thoughtfully. It sounds very solitary. It is, he admitted, but peaceful. He stood and gathered her empty bowl. Most days, that's enough. By the 5th day, Naomi was able to walk short distances within the cabin. Her sunburn had begun to fade, replaced by a light tan, and her cracked lips had healed. Quentin fashioned her a simple dress from one of his shirts and a length of fabric he had intended to use for curtains, as her wedding gown was beyond repair. It's not fashionable, he apologized as she examined herself in his small shaving mirror, but it's clean and decent. It's perfect, she assured him, smoothing the fabric over her hips. You've been so kind, Mr. Blackwood. I don't know how I can ever repay you, Quentin, he corrected gently. And there's no debt between us. Anyone would have done the same. I'm not so sure of that, Naomi replied, her eyes meeting his in the mirror. But thank you, Quentin. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of the growing connection that neither had anticipated. Quentin cleared his throat and stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. I should check on Thunder, he said, moving toward the door. Call if you need anything. Outside, Quentin leaned against the corral fence, watching his horse graze peacefully. The desert stretched before him, beautiful and harsh in the late afternoon sun. For 5 years, this landscape had been his refuge, his escape from the horrors of war and the complications of human connection. Now, with Naomi's presence, he found himself questioning the solitude he had so carefully cultivated. There was no denying the attraction he felt toward her. It wasn't just her beauty, though she possessed that in abundance despite her ordeal. It was her resilience, her quiet dignity, and the intelligence that shone in her eyes when they discussed books or politics during their evening conversations. She was educated and thoughtful, quick to laugh at his rare attempts at humor, and genuinely interested in his simple life. But she was promised to another man, a man who was probably worried sick about her, perhaps organizing search parties even now. Quentin knew he should ride to Copper Springs and inform Donovan that his bride was safe. It was the honorable thing to do. Yet each day he found another reason to delay. Naomi wasn't strong enough yet. The weather looked threatening, Thunder seemed off his feed. The truth, which he was reluctant to admit even to himself, was that he didn't want her to leave. Inside the cabin, Naomi sat at the table, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood. Her strength was returning, but her thoughts remained conflicted. Patrick Donovan was waiting for her in Copper Springs, a stranger to whom she had promised herself in marriage. A practical arrangement that would provide security and respectability. It had seemed so straightforward when she left Boston. Now, after her near-death experience and these days of recovery in Quentin's care, nothing seemed straightforward anymore. She had come to know this quiet, thoughtful man to appreciate his gentle hands as he tended her injuries, his low voice as he read to her from his small collection of books, his respectful distance as she regained her independence. He was nothing like she had imagined Western men to be. There was a depth to him, a complexity born of suffering and solitude. And increasingly, there was an undeniable attraction that sparked between them when their eyes met or their hands accidentally touched. An attraction she had no right to feel, given her commitment to another. The door opened and Quentin stepped back inside, bringing with him the scent of desert air and leather. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his eyes assessing her with now familiar concern. "Better," she replied. "Strong enough to help with dinner, I think," he nodded, seemingly pleased. "Good. I was thinking stew tonight. I shot a rabbit this morning." They worked together in companionable silence, Naomi chopping the vegetables while Quentin prepared the meat. It felt strangely domestic, as if they had been sharing this kitchen for years rather than days. The thought brought a flush to Naomi's cheeks that had nothing to do with her recent sunburn. "Tomorrow," Quentin said suddenly, his back to her as he stirred the pot, "I should ride to Copper Springs. Let your fiancé know you're safe." The words hung in the air between them, disrupting the peaceful moment, Naomi's knife stilled on the cutting board. "Yes," she agreed quietly, "I suppose you should." Quentin turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Unless, he seemed to struggle with himself before continuing. "Unless you're not ready to see him yet. Your recovery has been good, but another few days of rest wouldn't hurt." It was an excuse, and they both knew it, but Naomi found herself nodding. "Perhaps that would be wise. I should be at my best when I meet Patrick for the first time." Relief flickered across Quentin's face before he masked it. "Then it's settled. A few more days of recovery and then we'll make the journey together." That night, after a dinner that neither of them fully tasted despite its flavor, they sat before the fire. The spring evenings were still cool in the desert, and the warmth of the flames was welcome. Quentin had insisted that Naomi continue to use his bed while he slept on his pallet near the fire, an arrangement she had stopped protesting after the second night. "Tell me about your life before the war," Naomi said, watching the firelight play across his features. In these moments, when his guard was down, she could see glimpses of the young man he must have been before battle, and solitude shaped him. Quentin was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. Then, softly, "I was studying law at the University of Virginia. My father was a judge, and it was expected that I would follow in his footsteps." A faint smile touched his lips. "I was engaged to be married." "Her name was Elizabeth." "What happened?" Naomi asked gently. "When the war came, I chose the Union despite my Southern upbringing. My father disowned me. Elizabeth's family forbade her to continue our engagement." His eyes remained fixed on the flames. "She married a Confederate officer 6 months later. He died at Gettysburg." "I'm sorry," Quentin shrugged. "It was a lifetime ago. I'm not the same man who loved her." He looked up, meeting Naomi's gaze. "What about you? Was there someone before your arrangement with Donovan?" "No," she admitted. "I was too focused on my teaching and then on caring for my father during his illness. There was a colleague who expressed interest, but," she hesitated, "I never felt for him what I thought I should feel for a husband. And Donovan, I don't know him," she said simply. "I hoped that affection might grow with time and shared purpose." Quentin nodded, understanding. Many marriages began that way, especially on the frontier where practical considerations often outweighed romantic notions. "And now?" he asked, his voice lower, more intimate. Naomi looked into the fire, afraid to meet his eyes. "Now I'm not sure of anything." The following morning dawned clear and bright. Naomi awoke feeling stronger than she had since her ordeal began. She dressed in the simple garment Quentin had made for her and ventured outside to find him chopping wood, his shirt damp with exertion. "Good morning," she called, shielding her eyes from the sun. He paused, axe mid-swing, and turned to her with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Morning, you're up early." "I thought I might take a short walk. The fresh air feels wonderful after being confined to bed." Concern flashed across his features. Don't go too far, the desert can be disorienting even when you're at full strength. I'll stay within sight of the cabin, she promised, touched by his protective instinct. The desert in the morning light was surprisingly beautiful. Cacti bloomed with vibrant flowers, their stark beauty contrasting with the rugged landscape. Small lizards darted across the sand, and overhead, a hawk circled lazily on thermal currents. Naomi walked slowly, savoring the feel of solid ground beneath her feet and the expanding sense of strength in her body. From this vantage point, she could see Quentin's entire homestead, the modest cabin, the corral where Thunder and 2 other horses now grazed, a small garden plot where vegetables struggled against the arid conditions, and beyond, a few head of cattle grazing on the sparse desert vegetation. It was a hard life, she realized, requiring constant work and vigilance. Yet there was something appealing about its simplicity and independence. As she watched, Quentin set aside his axe and walked toward the stream that ran near the property. He stripped off his shirt, revealing a torso muscled from physical labor and marked with the scars of war. Kneeling by the water, he splashed his face and chest, the droplets catching the sunlight like diamonds. Naomi knew she should look away, that observing him in this private moment was improper. But she found herself transfixed by the sight of him so utterly at home in this wild landscape, so different from the city men she had known. He must have sensed her gaze, for he looked up suddenly, catching her watching him. Even at this distance, she could see his eyes widen with surprise, then soften with something else, something that sent a shiver through her despite the growing heat of the day. He raised a hand in greeting, and she returned the gesture before turning back toward the cabin, her cheeks burning with more than sunburn. Inside, she busied herself with preparing breakfast, trying to banish the image of Quentin by the stream from her mind. It wasn't proper to have such thoughts about a man who wasn't her fiancé. Yet the very fact that she could think of Patrick Donovan as her fiancé, only in the most technical sense a stranger with whom she had an agreement, complicated her sense of propriety. Quentin entered a few minutes later, his hair damp and his clean shirt clinging slightly to his still wet skin. "Something smells good," he remarked, moving to the stove where she was frying bacon. "Just breakfast," she replied, acutely aware of his proximity. "It's the least I can do to thank you for your hospitality." "You don't need to thank me, Naomi." The way he said her name, with a slight emphasis on the first syllable, made it sound like something precious. "Having company has been nice." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the small kitchen seemed charged with unspoken feelings. Then Quentin cleared his throat and stepped back. "I should feed the horses before we eat." The day passed in a series of shared tasks and careful conversations, both of them skirting around the growing tension between them. By evening, when they again sat before the fire, the unspoken had become almost palpable. "Tomorrow," Quentin said finally, breaking a lengthy silence, "if you feel strong enough, perhaps we should ride to Copper Springs." Naomi's heart sank, though she had been expecting this. Her health was clearly improving. There was no logical reason to delay any longer. "Yes," she agreed softly. "I suppose we should," Quentin nodded, his jaw tight. "It's a full day's journey. We'll need to leave at first light." "I'll be ready." Another silence fell, heavier than before. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, a lonely sound that echoed Naomi's own sense of impending loss. "Naomi," Quentin began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "I want you to know that these past days, having you here—" He shook his head, frustrated with his inability to express himself. "I know," she said gently. "I've felt it too." His eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of hope and resignation. "You have an obligation to Donovan, I respect that." "An obligation," she repeated, testing the word. "Yes, I suppose I do, if circumstances were different." "But they're not," she finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. Quentin leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. "What if they could be?" Naomi's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "You've never met this man. You agreed to marry him when you had no other options, but now—" He hesitated, then continued with renewed determination. Now you have a choice. You could stay here with me." The offer hung in the air between them, audacious and tempting. Naomi's heart raced at the possibility. "Quentin, I barely know you. You know me better after these days than you know Donovan after months of correspondence," he countered. "And I know I'm falling in love with you, Naomi Prescott." The declaration, simple and direct, struck her like a physical blow. No man had ever spoken to her with such honest emotion. "This is madness," she whispered, though she made no move to distance herself from him. "Perhaps," he acknowledged, "but I've never been more certain of anything." He reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek without quite touching it. "I'm not a wealthy man. I can't offer you the security that Donovan probably can, but I would cherish you every day of my life." Naomi closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the decision before her. To honor her agreement with a stranger or to follow her heart toward this man who had saved her life and now offered her his love. It wasn't just about passion or attraction, though both were undeniably present. It was about choosing a life, a future, a partner to face the world with. "I need time," she said finally, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "To think clearly about this." Quentin nodded, withdrawing his hand. "Of course, we'll still ride to Copper Springs tomorrow. You can meet Donovan, see the life he's offering. Then decide." He stood, moving toward his pallet. "No matter what you choose, I want you to be happy, Naomi." She watched him prepare for sleep, his movements deliberate and controlled, betraying none of the emotion that had been evident in his voice moments before. This was a man accustomed to disappointment, she realized. A man who had learned to expect little from life and others. "Quentin," she called softly as he lay down. He turned to look at her, his face half illuminated by the dying fire. "Yes, thank you for giving me a choice." His smile was sad but genuine. "Everyone deserves that much at least." Sleep eluded Naomi that night. She lay in Quentin's bed, surrounded by his scent leather and pine and something uniquely him, and tried to imagine her future. With Patrick Donovan, she would have security, respectability, perhaps even comfort. A life managing accounts in a mercantile, being a proper wife to a man twice her age. It was the safe choice, the practical choice, the choice she had resigned herself to when she left Boston. With Quentin, the future was less certain. Life on a small ranch would be hard work, with none of the conveniences she had grown up with. But there would be love, real love, not the hoped-for affection she had settled for with Donovan. There would be partnership with a man who saw her as an equal, who valued her thoughts and feelings. There would be passion, too, the kind that had flared between them with increasing intensity these past days. Dawn was breaking when she finally made her decision. She rose and dressed quietly, then stepped outside to watch the sun rise over the desert. The landscape that had nearly killed her now seemed to offer a new beginning if she was brave enough to grasp it. Quentin joined her a few minutes later, his expression guarded. "Beautiful morning," he observed, standing beside her but not touching. "Yes," she agreed. "Quentin, about last night, you don't need to say anything now," he interrupted gently. "Let's get to Copper Springs. You can meet Donovan, see the town, then decide." Naomi nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his suggestion. All right. They prepared for the journey in companionable silence. Quentin saddled Thunder and a more docile mare named Daisy for Naomi. He packed provisions, water, and a small bundle of Naomi's belongings, the torn remnants of her wedding dress, and the few items she had managed to keep during her ordeal in the desert. By mid-morning, they were riding across the desert toward Copper Springs. Quentin kept a careful eye on Naomi, concerned that the journey might tax her still recovering strength, but she sat tall in the saddle, her face set with determination. They stopped occasionally to rest and water the horses, speaking little but sharing glances that conveyed more than words could express. As the sun began its descent, the town of Copper Springs appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings nestled against the backdrop of copper-rich hills that had given the settlement its name. Naomi felt her stomach tighten with anxiety as they approached. Somewhere in that town was Patrick Donovan, the man who had paid for her journey west, who was expecting to marry her in just a few days' time. "Are you all right?" Quentin asked, noticing her tension. "Just nervous," she admitted. It feels strange to be arriving like this after everything that's happened. He nodded in understanding. We'll find Donovan first, explain the situation. After that, well, it's your decision what happens next. They rode down the main street of Copper Springs as the afternoon shadows lengthened. The town was larger than Naomi had expected, with a proper hotel, several saloons, a church, and various businesses including, she presumed, Donovan's mercantile. People stopped to stare at the newcomers, particularly at Naomi in her makeshift dress. Clearly not original trail attire. Quentin directed their horses toward a large building with Donovan's general merchandise painted in bold letters across its facade. He dismounted and helped Naomi down, his hands lingering at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, smoothing her dress and attempting to tidy her hair, which she had braided simply for the journey. "As I'll ever be." They entered the mercantile together, the bell above the door announcing their arrival. The store was well stocked and orderly, with goods ranging from basic necessities to luxury items not often found in frontier towns. A clerk looked up from the counter, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of them. "Can I help you folks?" he asked, setting aside the ledger he had been examining. "We're looking for Patrick Donovan," Quentin replied. "Is he available?" "Mr. Donovan is in his office. May I ask who's calling?" Naomi stepped forward. "My name is Naomi Prescott. He's expecting me." Recognition dawned on the clerk's face. "Miss Prescott, but we thought, that is, Mr. Donovan has been organizing search parties for days." The stagecoach was found abandoned and with the bodies of the driver and another passenger. He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "I managed to escape," Naomi explained briefly. "Mr. Blackwood found me in the desert and saved my life. I'll get Mr. Donovan right away," the clerk said, hurrying toward a door at the back of the store. "Please, wait here." In the moments that followed, Naomi felt as if she were standing on the edge of a precipice. Whatever happened next would determine the course of her life. She glanced at Quentin, who stood tall and stoic beside her, his face betraying none of the emotion she knew he must be feeling. The door opened, and a man emerged tall, well-dressed, with gray at his temples and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes, which had been wide with surprise, narrowed slightly as he took in the scene before him. Naomi in her simple, makeshift dress, standing beside the rugged figure of Quentin Blackwood. "Miss Prescott?" he asked, his voice cultured and controlled. "Is it really you?" Naomi stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mr. Donovan, yes, it's me. I apologize for the delay and for any worry I may have caused you." He took her hand, his grip firm but not warm. "When the stagecoach was found, I feared the worst. What happened? How did you come to be here with?" He looked questioningly at Quentin. "Quentin Blackwood," Quentin supplied, offering his hand. Donovan shook it briefly, his attention returning quickly to Naomi. "Perhaps we should speak in my office," Donovan suggested, gesturing toward the back room. "Mr. Blackwood, if you'll excuse us, actually," Naomi interrupted, "I'd like Quentin to join us. He saved my life and he can help explain what happened." Donovan's expression tightened momentarily before he nodded. "Of course, this way, please." The office was as orderly as the store, with a large desk, filing cabinets, and a small sitting area. Donovan indicated for them to take seats while he closed the door, ensuring their privacy. "Now, Miss Prescott," he said, sitting behind his desk, "please tell me what occurred." Naomi recounted the attack on the stagecoach, her flight into the desert, and her eventual collapse. Quentin then explained how he had found her, nursed her back to health, and brought her to Copper Springs as soon as she was strong enough to travel. Throughout the narrative, Donovan listened intently, his eyes moving between them with increasing calculation. "I see," he said when they had finished. "It seems I owe you a debt of gratitude, Mr. Blackwood, for saving my fiancée's life." "No debt," Quentin replied evenly. "I did what anyone would do." Donovan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nevertheless, I insist on compensating you for your trouble and, of course, for the delay in our wedding plans." He turned to Naomi. "I've taken the liberty of postponing the ceremony until next Saturday. That should give you time to recover fully and to acquire suitable attire." Naomi felt a cold weight settle in her stomach at the businesslike way Donovan discussed their wedding. There was no warmth in his manner, no real concern for her ordeal beyond how it affected his schedule. Mr. Donovan, she began carefully, much has happened since I agreed to our arrangement. Arrangement, he repeated, his eyebrows rising. I prefer to think of it as an engagement, Miss Prescott. Of course, she conceded. But I think perhaps we should take some time to become better acquainted before proceeding with the wedding. Donovan's expression hardened. I've already postponed once. The minister and guests have been notified of the new date. It would be most irregular to delay further. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. Besides, I've invested considerably in your journey here. The least you can do is honor our agreement. Quentin tensed beside her but remained silent, allowing Naomi to handle the situation. I understand your perspective, Mr. Donovan, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. And I appreciate your investment. However, I nearly died in that desert. It's given me cause to reconsider many things, including the wisdom of marrying a complete stranger. I see. Donovan sat back, his gaze shifting to Quentin. And I suppose Mr. Blackwood here has had nothing to do with this reconsideration. Before Naomi could respond, the door to the office opened, and a woman entered, young, perhaps 25, stylishly dressed and undeniably beautiful. She stopped short at the sight of the gathering. Oh. I'm sorry, Patrick, I didn't realize you had company. Her eyes lingered on Quentin with obvious appreciation before turning to Naomi with surprise. Is this Miss Prescott? Yes, Donovan confirmed, rising to his feet. She has miraculously survived the stagecoach attack. Miss Prescott, may I introduce Miss Clara Wells, daughter of Judge Wells and a dear friend of the family. The way he said dear friend made Naomi suspect that Clara Wells was more than just an acquaintance. The woman's possessive stance near Donovan and the intimate way she addressed him by his first name confirmed her suspicion. Miss Wells, Naomi acknowledged with a nod. Pleased to meet you. Clara's smile was strained. Likewise, we had given up hope of your arrival, Miss Prescott. Such a relief to find you safe. The undercurrent of insincerity was unmistakable. Naomi glanced at Quentin, who was watching the interaction with narrowed eyes, clearly picking up on the same tension she felt. Yes, quite fortunate, Donovan agreed, though he seemed less than enthusiastic. Mr. Blackwood here found Miss Prescott collapsed in the desert and nursed her back to health. Clara's gaze returned to Quentin, assessing him more thoroughly. How heroic, she murmured. The town owes you a debt, Mr. Blackwood. As I was just telling Mr. Donovan, there's no debt, Quentin replied. But I appreciate the sentiment. An awkward silence fell over the room. Naomi felt as if she had stumbled into the middle of a play without knowing her lines. The dynamic between Donovan and Clara was unmistakable, as was Donovan's discomfort at having his mail-order bride arrive when he had clearly moved on to other prospects. Well, Donovan said finally, breaking the silence, we have much to discuss, Miss Prescott. Perhaps you would like to rest at the hotel first. I've taken the liberty of securing a room for you there. That's very kind, Naomi replied, rising from her chair. I admit the journey has been tiring. I'll escort you, Quentin offered, standing as well. Donovan frowned. That won't be necessary. Clara can accompany Miss Prescott to the hotel. It would be more appropriate. Clara's smile tightened, but she nodded in agreement. Of course, I'd be happy to. Naomi looked between Donovan and Clara, then at Quentin, whose face had resumed its stoic mask. The situation was becoming clearer by the moment. Donovan had invited her here as his bride, but in her absence, he had developed an attachment to Clara Wells. Her arrival was now an inconvenience rather than a joy. Actually, Naomi said, straightening her shoulders, I'd prefer if Quentin accompanied me. He's familiar with my condition and has been ensuring my well-being for days now. Donovan's frown deepened. Miss Prescott, as your fiancé, I must insist, you are not yet my husband, Mr. Donovan, Naomi interrupted, a newfound strength in her voice. And given what I'm observing, I'm not entirely certain you wish to be. Clara flushed, and Donovan's expression turned cold. I don't know what you're implying, but I assure you I intend to honor our agreement. Honor, yes. But do you actually desire it? Naomi challenged. Because from where I stand, it seems Miss Wells holds that particular distinction. The room fell silent again, the tension palpable. Finally, Donovan sighed, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. Perhaps we should all take some time to reflect before continuing this discussion. Miss Prescott is clearly tired from her journey and emotions are running high. An excellent suggestion, Naomi agreed, grateful for the reprieve. Shall we meet again tomorrow? Donovan nodded stiffly. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, here in my office. Until then, Naomi said, turning toward the door. Quentin followed, his hand coming to rest lightly at the small of her back, a gesture of support that did not go unnoticed by either Donovan or Clara. Outside in the fading light of day, Naomi let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Well, that was illuminating. Quentin's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Not quite the reunion you expected, not at all, she admitted, though I can't say I'm entirely disappointed. They walked toward the hotel, leading their horses behind them. The town was quieting as businesses closed for the evening, though the saloons were just beginning their nightly activities. What will you do? Quentin asked as they reached the hotel entrance. Naomi turned to face him. I'm not sure yet, but I know what I won't do: marry a man who clearly has feelings for another woman, especially when I. She hesitated, then continued more softly, especially when my own heart is being pulled in a different direction. Hope flickered in Quentin's eyes, but he remained cautious. You should rest, think things through. This is a decision that will shape your entire future. I know, she agreed, and I intend to choose wisely. She reached out, touching his arm briefly. Will you be staying in town tonight? I'll get a room here, he confirmed. I won't leave until I know you're settled one way or another. The promise warmed her. Thank you, Quentin, for everything, he nodded, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer before he stepped back. Get some rest, Naomi. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Inside the hotel, Naomi found that Donovan had indeed reserved a room for her, a comfortable space with a real bed, wash basin, and small writing desk. After the simplicity of Quentin's cabin, it seemed almost luxurious. Yet as she prepared for bed, she found herself missing the cozy warmth of his home, the sound of the fire crackling, and the quiet reassurance of his presence nearby. Sleep came fitfully. Her dreams a confused mixture of desert landscapes, Donovan's calculating eyes, and Quentin's gentle hands. She woke early, feeling more resolved than confused. Dressing in the same simple garment Quentin had made for her, she had nothing else. She went downstairs to the hotel dining room for breakfast. To her surprise, Quentin was already there, seated at a corner table with a cup of coffee. He stood when he saw her, pulling out a chair with a formality that made her smile. You're up early, she observed, taking the offered seat. Force of habit, he replied. Ranch work doesn't wait for the sun. They ordered breakfast and ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Naomi spoke. I've been thinking about what to say to Mr. Donovan this morning. Quentin looked up, his expression carefully neutral. And I'm going to release him from our engagement, she said simply. It's clear his affections lie elsewhere, and to be honest, so do mine. The neutrality in Quentin's face gave way to a cautious hope. Naomi. I know what you're going to say, she interrupted gently. That I shouldn't make hasty decisions, that I barely know you, that life on your ranch would be hard compared to what Donovan could offer. She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. But I've never been more certain of anything. These past days with you, despite the circumstances, have been more genuine and meaningful than any relationship I've known. Quentin turned his hand to clasp hers. Life with me won't be easy, Naomi. I can't offer you the comforts Donovan can. I don't want comfort, she replied firmly. I want partnership, I want truth, I want. She hesitated, then continued with a soft smile. I want love, Quentin, and I believe I've found it with you. His eyes, usually so guarded, shone with emotion. Are you sure, truly sure? I am, she affirmed. If you'll have me, that is. The smile that broke across his face transformed him, erasing years of solitude and sorrow. Have you, Naomi? I'd be the luckiest man alive. Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Clara Wells, who entered the dining room and stopped short at the sight of them. their hands still joined across the table. Her expression shifted from surprise to calculation before she approached their table. "Miss Prescott, Mr. Blackwood," she greeted them with forced cordiality. "I hope you rested well." "Very well, thank you," Naomi replied, withdrawing her hand from Quentin's but not breaking his gaze. "Will you be joining us for breakfast?" Clara hesitated, then took the third chair at their table. "Just for a moment." "I wanted to speak with you privately, Miss Prescott, but perhaps it's better that Mr. Blackwood hears this as well." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Clara leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Patrick, Mr. Donovan and I have been close for some time now. When the news came that you had likely perished in the stagecoach attack, he was, of course, saddened, but also—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Also somewhat relieved. Our attachment had grown, you see, and your arrival would have complicated matters." "I gathered as much from our meeting yesterday," Naomi acknowledged. "Though I'm surprised Mr. Donovan didn't simply write to inform me that our arrangement was no longer desired." Clara had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "He had invested in your journey, and there was a certain obligation he felt. Patrick is nothing if not honorable." Quentin made a small sound that might have been skepticism, which Clara pointedly ignored. "In any case," she continued, "I wanted you to know that, while Patrick intends to honor his commitment to you, his heart lies elsewhere. I don't wish to cause you pain, Miss Prescott, but I thought you deserved the truth before your meeting this morning." Naomi studied the woman before her, beautiful, well-connected, clearly accustomed to getting what she wanted. Yet there was also a vulnerability in her eyes, a genuine emotion when she spoke of Donovan. "I appreciate your candor, Miss Wells," Naomi said finally. "And you need not worry. I have no intention of holding Mr. Donovan to an arrangement that no longer suits either of us. In fact, I plan to release him from our engagement this morning." Relief washed over Clara's face. "Truly? Oh, Miss Prescott, that's most generous of you. Patrick will be so—" She stopped, composing herself. "That is, I'm sure Mr. Donovan will appreciate your understanding of the situation." "I'm sure he will," Naomi agreed, unable to resist adding, "especially since my own heart has found its direction as well." She glanced meaningfully at Quentin, whose eyes crinkled with a suppressed smile. Clara followed her gaze, understanding dawning. "I see," she said, a new respect in her voice. "Well, it seems we might all find happiness after all." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I should go. Patrick will be expecting us at 10. Thank you for your understanding, Miss Prescott and Mr. Blackwood." She paused, offering him a genuine smile. "You're a fortunate man." After Clara departed, Naomi and Quentin finished their breakfast in a state of quiet elation. The prospect of freedom from obligation, from a loveless marriage, from solitude hung between them like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. At 10 o'clock precisely, they presented themselves at Donovan's office. The mercantile owner received them with the same formal courtesy as before, though there was a new tension in his manner. Clara was already present, seated in a chair near his desk. "Miss Prescott, Mr. Blackwood," Donovan greeted them. "Please be seated. I trust you rested well." "Very well, thank you," Naomi replied, taking a seat. Quentin remained standing behind her chair, a silent support. "Mr. Donovan, I'd like to address the matter of our engagement directly, if I may." Donovan adjusted his glasses nervously. "Of course. Though perhaps it would be more appropriate if we spoke privately." "I don't think that's necessary," Naomi said firmly. "What I have to say concerns all of us here." She took a deep breath, then continued with quiet confidence. "Mr. Donovan, when I agreed to become your wife, it was under circumstances of great personal distress. My father's death had left me without resources or prospects. Your offer seemed providential, a chance for security and a new beginning. I was grateful then, and I remain grateful now for the opportunity you extended." Donovan nodded stiffly, clearly unsure where this was leading. "However," Naomi continued, "much has changed since I made that agreement. My journey west nearly cost me my life. In the process of recovering, I've had cause to reevaluate what truly matters to me, what kind of life I wish to lead, and with whom." She glanced back at Quentin briefly before returning her attention to Donovan. It's become clear to me that our arrangement, while practical, lacks the foundation of mutual affection that I now believe is essential for a successful marriage. Miss Prescott, Donovan began, his tone formal. If you're concerned about my commitment, I'm not, she interrupted gently. In fact, I believe your commitment lies elsewhere. She looked pointedly at Clara, whose cheeks flushed. And I find I cannot fault you for that, as my own heart has found its direction as well. Understanding dawned on Donovan's face as his gaze shifted to Quentin. I see, he said slowly. You wish to dissolve our engagement. I do, Naomi confirmed, with no ill feelings or recriminations. You offered me a path forward when I desperately needed one, and for that I will always be grateful. But I believe we would both be doing ourselves a disservice if we proceeded with a marriage neither of us truly desires. Silence fell over the office as Donovan absorbed her words. Finally, he removed his glasses, polishing them absently with a handkerchief. You're a remarkable woman, Miss Prescott, he said at last. Direct and honest in a way few people are. I can't pretend I'm not relieved by your decision, though I would have honored our agreement had you wished it. I know, Naomi acknowledged. That speaks to your character, Mr. Donovan. He replaced his glasses and looked at Quentin. And you, Mr. Blackwood, what are your intentions toward Miss Prescott? Quentin stepped forward, his hand coming to rest on the back of Naomi's chair. My intentions are honorable, sir. I love her, and I intend to marry her if she'll have me. I will, Naomi said softly, looking up at him with a smile that conveyed all the emotion words could not express. Donovan glanced at Clara, whose eyes shone with barely contained joy. Well, he said, clearing his throat, it seems we all have reason to celebrate today. Clara, my dear, perhaps you join me for lunch. We have much to discuss. Clara's smile was radiant. I'd be delighted, Patrick. As they left Donovan's office, Naomi felt lighter than she had in months, perhaps years. The burden of obligation had been lifted, replaced by the exhilarating freedom of choosing her own path. What now? She asked Quentin as they stepped into the sunlight of the main street. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers with a casualness that felt both new and familiar. First, I think we should get you some proper clothes, he suggested, eyeing her makeshift dress with a smile. Then, if you're willing, we could visit the preacher. Naomi's heart skipped. Today, unless you need more time, he replied, suddenly uncertain. I don't want to rush you, Naomi. We could wait, get to know each other better first. She shook her head, squeezing his hand. I don't need more time. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The relief and joy that spread across his face was all the confirmation she needed that she was making the right choice. Quentin Blackwood might not be the husband she had expected when she left Boston, but he was the one her heart had chosen, a man of integrity, courage, and unexpected tenderness. That afternoon, Naomi acquired a simple but lovely dress from one of the town's shops. Paid for with funds Donovan insisted on providing as compensation for her troubles. By evening, she and Quentin stood before the local minister in his small study, exchanging vows that were all the more meaningful for being freely chosen. The ceremony was brief and private, witnessed only by the minister's wife and, surprisingly, Clara Wells, who arrived just before it began with a small bouquet of desert flowers for the bride. I wish you both every happiness, she said sincerely, and I thank you, Miss Prescott, Mrs. Blackwood, for your generosity of spirit. As they rode out of Copper Springs the following morning, husband and wife bound for the small ranch that would now be their home, Naomi reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. The desert that had nearly claimed her life had also given her a new one, a life with a man who had rescued her in more ways than one. Any regrets? Quentin asked as they crested a hill, the vast landscape spreading before them in all its wild beauty. Naomi looked at him, this quiet, strong man who had become her husband. The early morning sun highlighted the planes of his face, the slight gray at his temples, the lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. She thought of the life awaiting them, the hard work, the challenges, the joys of building something together. Not a single one, she replied, her heart full. His smile was answer enough, but he spoke anyway, his voice rough with emotion. Only that I didn't find you sooner. The desert stretched before them, no longer a place of fear and death, but a landscape of possibility. Naomi urged her horse forward, riding beside her husband toward the home. They would share a home that would be filled with love, respect, and the kind of partnership she had never dared to hope for. The journey had been long and perilous, but as they rode side by side across the land that had brought them together, Naomi knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. Not in the comfortable security of a merchant's home, but in the honest simplicity of a life built with the man who had refused to leave her side when she needed him most, and who, she was certain, never would. 5 years later, Quentin stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching as Naomi taught their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, to collect eggs from the chicken coop. The little girl's laughter rang out across the yard as she carefully placed each egg in the basket, her mother's patient hands guiding her. Their son, James, not yet a year old, slept peacefully in a cradle Quentin had carved during the long winter evenings. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. The cattle herd had grown, the garden yielded abundant vegetables, and Quentin's reputation as a horse trainer had spread throughout the territory, bringing steady income and respect. But it was his family that filled Quentin with the deepest pride and joy. Naomi had taken to ranch life with surprising ease, her determination and intelligence making her not just a wife but a true partner in all their endeavors. She had established a small school in their home, teaching the children of neighboring ranchers alongside their own daughter. Her beauty had only deepened with time and motherhood, and Quentin found himself falling in love with her anew each day. As Naomi and Emma returned from the chicken coop, basket full of eggs, Quentin stepped down from the porch to meet them. Emma ran to him, and he swept her up into his arms, her small hands patting his cheeks as she recounted her egg-gathering adventure. "And Mama says I can help make the biscuits too," she exclaimed, her blue eyes so like her mother's wide with excitement. "Is that so?" Quentin asked, glancing at Naomi with a smile. "Well, you'd better be careful. Your mama makes the best biscuits in the territory. You might learn too well and put her out of a job." Emma giggled, and Naomi shook her head in mock indignation. "I'll have you know, Quentin Blackwood, that my position as chief biscuit maker on this ranch is quite secure." "Never doubted it for a moment," he replied, leaning in to kiss her lightly. Even after 5 years, the simple pleasure of being able to kiss his wife whenever he wished had not diminished. As they walked together toward the cabin, James's cries announcing his awakening from his nap, Quentin reflected on the twist of fate that had brought Naomi into his life. The desert had nearly taken her, but in saving her, he had saved himself from a lifetime of solitude. Every hardship they had faced together, drought, harsh winters, the challenges of building a life from the unforgiving land had only strengthened the bond between them. That evening, with the children asleep and the chores completed, Quentin and Naomi sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Naomi leaned against his shoulder, her hand entwined with his. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been?" she asked softly. "If the stagecoach hadn't been attacked, if you hadn't found me in the desert," Quentin considered the question, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I'd still be here, I suppose, living alone with my horses and cattle, and you'd be in Copper Springs, married to Donovan. Mrs. Patrick Donovan, merchant's wife," Naomi mused. "It seems like someone else's life now. I can hardly imagine it. Are you ever sorry that you chose this life instead?" He asked the question lightly, but there was a hint of vulnerability beneath the words. Even after 5 years of marriage, part of him still marveled that this remarkable woman had chosen the harder path of ranch life over the comforts Donovan could have provided. Naomi turned to face him, her eyes serious in the fading light. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This life, our life, is everything I never knew I wanted. The work is hard, yes, but it's ours. The joy is real, the love." She reached up to touch his face. "The love is beyond anything I could have imagined." Quentin turned his head to kiss her palm, overwhelmed as always by the depth of feeling between them. "I thank God every day that I found you in that desert," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "that I was able to save you. And I thank God that you refused to leave my side, even after I healed," she replied with a soft smile, "that you gave me the courage to choose my own path." As darkness settled over the desert, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms and in the quiet contentment of a life well chosen. The ranch, their children, their love all had grown from that fateful day when a desperate bride lost in the desert had been found by a solitary cowboy who, in saving her, had found his own salvation. And as the stars emerged in the vast sky above, Quentin and Naomi Blackwood knew with absolute certainty that some journeys, no matter how perilous their beginnings, led exactly where they were meant to go.